Hello and welcome to the 15th episode of Toke TV, where we bring you the biggest in cannabis and hemp news every week. I'm Steve Elliott, the editor of TokeSignals.com, and I'll be guiding you through the news. First of all, though, let's take a look at our bud pick of the week. We have a beauty for you this week. I took this picture of a Thai Kush plant. It was a clone that I got at the CPC in the Georgetown neighborhood of Seattle from the lovely Lydia Inslee. And as you can see, the results so far have been spectacular. This girl has about 2 weeks to go until she's ready for harvest, but she's looking quite lovely in the meantime. Let's take a look at the news. 1 in 4 Americans say they'd buy marijuana if it became legal, according to a new poll that came out this week. This means that legalizing marijuana would more than double its potential market if the results of this poll are to be believed. The poll was taken by the Huffington Post and YouGov, and it indicates that 26% of Americans say that they would buy cannabis if it was legal in their state, compared to 9% who said they already buy it. The percentage who said that they would buy marijuana often jumped from 1% who already do so to 4% who said they would buy pot often if it was legal. When asked how often they'd buy weed, 18% said they'd buy it more often than they do now if it was legal. And that includes 16% who said they'd never buy pot now, but would, at least on rare occasions, buy it if it was legal. Those under age 30 were more likely to say that they'd buy cannabis if it was legal. 35% of them said so. And that they already buy it now. 16% of them said that. But even those among 65 and older, almost none of whom said they ever buy marijuana now. 9% said they'd get it at least occasionally if it was legal. Now, although big alcohol and big tobacco seem a bit spooked by the prospect of legal marijuana, after all, both have contributed millions of dollars to keep it illegal. There are more potential buyers for both alcohol and tobacco products than for cannabis products, according to the numbers. 81% of respondents said that they have used alcohol before, and 61% said they had tried cigarettes, but only 41% have tried marijuana. Another 11% said that they would consider trying marijuana if it was legal, of those respondents. Of those who have tried alcohol and would consider trying marijuana, 43% said they'd still buy alcohol more often than weed, and only 23% said they'd buy cannabis more often if it was legal. Those who had tried tobacco and would consider trying marijuana were somewhat more likely to say they'd buy weed instead of cigarettes if both were legal, 37% to 31%. Out of all respondents, 18% said they've used tobacco but would never consider trying cannabis, while 9% said they would consider trying marijuana but have never tried tobacco. 29% of those polled said that the price of marijuana would increase if it was legal. 25% thought that the price would come down, and 15% said they expected the price to remain about the same under legalization. This poll was conducted October 19th and 20th among 1,000 U.S. adults selected to match the demographics of the U.S. adult population. In Florida, advocates there are facing a big challenge, but they are confident. Marijuana advocates in Florida are trying to get 500,000 signatures in the next 90 days, and they're facing criticism primarily from conservative quarters. But they say they're quite confident they can pull this off. Now, we have hundreds of paid signature gatherers fanning out across Florida right now as part of a petition drive for the legalization of medical marijuana in the Sunshine State. Advocates have until February the 1st to get 683,149 valid signatures to qualify their proposal for the 2014 ballot. The People United for Medical Marijuana campaign has already collected about 200,000 signatures since July, and more than 100,000 of those have already been validated. But this leaves just 90 days to get signatures of roughly 500,000 voters. And this means that the campaign, I did a little math here, must average just more than 5,555 valid signatures per day from now until February the 1st. It's a big number we have to get between now and the beginning of the year, but we're confident we can do it, said campaign manager Ben Pilara. We have a statewide grassroots volunteer effort going on that's bringing in 5,000 to 10,000 signatures a week, and we just kicked back up our paid petition gathering effort, which by the middle of November should be pulling in about 60,000 to 70,000 signatures a week. So if Pilara's estimates are accurate there, they will make their goal. Paid petitioners can earn between $15 and $30 an hour, according to a Facebook page advertising the positions, and that's well above Florida's $7.79 minimum wage. One man, attorney and political fundraiser John Morgan, has donated about 75% of the effort's funding so far. The usual marijuana advocacy groups aren't closely involved in this campaign. Morgan has contributed about $250,000 of the group's $400,000 war chest. This proposed constitutional amendment would allow doctors to decide if an illness should qualify a patient for medical marijuana. State-issued medical marijuana cards would be renewed every 2 years. This is about the thousands of people in the state of Florida who are suffering every day, whose lives could be made better through the use of medical marijuana, according to Pilara. Republican Attorney General Pam Bondi, of course, filed on October 24th a challenge with the Florida Supreme Court, claiming that the language of the ballot initiative was misleading, that it would lead to de facto legalization, and that would allow marijuana in limitless situations, the way she put it. She says that the initiative should be barred from the ballot, and that is going before the Supreme Court of Florida on December 5th. Our position is, who better to make a determination of whether you have a debilitating illness than a physician, Pilara said. It's not a decision that should be left up to the state legislature or the state bureaucracy. Meanwhile, Save Our Society from Drugs, which is a whack job St. Petersburg-based group that fights marijuana legalization proposals across the country, blasted the medical marijuana initiative recently and filed written testimony. Simply put, crude marijuana does not meet the standards of modern medicine, claimed Amy Ronshausen, the group's interim deputy director, who apparently hadn't bothered to familiarize herself with actual patients. Her testimony was filed with the Office of Economic and Demographic Research, which is in charge of determining the proposal's economic impact. Ronshausen must not understand the purpose of the Office of Economic and Demographic Research, according to Pilara. Interim Deputy Director Ronshausen's statements are ridiculous on their face and irrelevant to the ongoing fiscal impact estimating process, Pilara said. According to the Office of Economic and Demographic Research, by the way, between 175,000 and 450,000 Floridians would qualify for medical marijuana under the proposed ballot language. But even if this amendment qualifies for the ballot, remember, it still has a steep hill to climb. Under Florida law, constitutional amendments must get 60% of the vote. A simple majority wouldn't be enough. We have an unfortunate statement from a drug cop in Missouri for our next story. He says marijuana legalization advocates are stupid. We get this useful information from a Missouri Drug Task Force cop who debated marijuana legalization advocates from the group Show Me Cannabis at a town hall meeting. He apparently got butthurt during the debate because some of the people there disagreed with his point of view. When he got safely home at his computer and away from those people, he posted a rant on Facebook in which he basically called the legalization advocates a bunch of stupid potheads. This was reported in the Riverfront Times by Ray Downs. Seemingly upset that these folks dared to hold an opinion different than his when it comes to cannabis, the petulant policeman, Sergeant Kevin Glazer of the SEMO Drug Task Force, who evidently is having some real difficulty adjusting to the realities of modern America, got home and really gave those weed suckers a piece of his mind. It was held at the Cape Girardeau Library, Sergeant Glazer posted. This was a good location because it afforded many in the group an opportunity to actually visit a library, probably for the first time in their life. But wait, he really got going after that. My views and opinions were not well received, and they appeared to have very closed minds towards what I had to say, Sergeant Glazer posted. You'll just have to imagine him sniffling to himself indignantly as he furiously typed. Many impressed me as having no minds at all, he posted, or at least very slow functioning minds. The upstanding sergeant seemed happy to share his perceptions of those who favor marijuana legalization. To wit, a quick scan of the room should by itself be ample evidence for not legalizing marijuana, he posted. It scared the hell out of me that these people actually go to the polls and vote. There you have it, marijuana community. If you disagree with a good sergeant, you really have no business even voting. That's too scary for his simpering sensibilities. Tomorrow I go back to fighting crime and serving the public, and they go back to drawing their welfare check and trying to figure out how to legally grow marijuana. Oh, I mean hemp, so they can turn this economy around, cure cancer, treat glaucoma, and destroy the Mexican drug cartels, the sergeant posted. What a great country. Who knew drug cops could be so snarky? RFT wrote. Daily RFT is looking into if Glazer snapped twice and flicked his hair back after he posted this on Facebook. Such comments are thoroughly unprofessional and unbecoming of a government employee, and I believe you owe the people who attended the meeting and Missouri taxpayers generally an apology, wrote John Payne, executive director of Show Me Cannabis, in a statement to the dim-witted sergeant. Moreover, I wonder what the sentiment expressed in your post says about your motivations for enforcing the laws prohibiting cannabis, Payne wrote. You seem to be motivated primarily by sheer personal animus against a group of people whom you obviously find distasteful. Payne challenged Sergeant Glazer to a debate on December 12th in Poplar Bluff. I fully believe that the more people know about this issue, the more they will be convinced that a system of legalization and regulation is a superior policy for dealing with cannabis than prohibition, Payne wrote. I presume that you believe the inverse. If that's the case, then let us both put our convictions to the test in an open public debate. Sergeant Glazer hasn't responded to the invitation yet. In California this week, we have two parents who are suing after their autistic teen son was entrapped by cops for selling marijuana in high school. This lawsuit highlights the cruel practices and ineffectiveness of undercover narcotics operations in schools. Now, the parents of this 17-year-old special needs student who was arrested in an undercover police operation on Thursday announced that they are suing the school district that authorized this operation. The student suffers from a range of disabilities, and he was falsely befriended by a police officer who repeatedly asked the boy to buy him drugs. After more than 3 weeks of pressure, 60 text messages, and repeated hounding by the officer, the student was finally able to buy half a joint from a homeless man that he then gave to his new and only friend, who had given him $20 weeks before. He did it once again before refusing to accommodate the officer anymore, at which point the officer broke off all ties with the child. Shortly thereafter, the student was arrested in school in front of his classmates as part of a sting that nabbed 22 students in all, many of them special needs students. Our son is permanently scarred from the abuse he suffered, said Catherine and Doug Snodgrass, the boy's parents, and they're suing the Temecula Valley Unified School District, the Director of Child Welfare and Attendance, Michael Hubbard, and the Director of Special Education, Kimberly Velez, for negligence, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and other charges. Right now, our focus is on him and our entire family. They said they hope that this suit will send a message around the country that these raids will not be tolerated. What we have witnessed here is the polar opposite of good policing and an example of how the drug war skews the priorities of law enforcement officers, said LAPD Deputy Chief Stephen Downing, retired, who now speaks on behalf of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, LEAP, which is a group of law enforcement officials opposed to the drug war. There was no crime here until the police coerced a special needs student into committing one, Downing said. They didn't lessen the amount of drugs available, and they didn't provide help to any students who may have had a legitimate problem. Instead, they diminished the life prospects of everyone they came in contact with, Downing said. As a parent, as a retired police officer, as a human being, this outrages me. The LAPD stopped using undercover stings back in 2005 after a review suggested that police were targeting special needs children and that operations were ineffective at reducing the availability of drugs in schools. A Department of Justice study would later confirm the finding that such operations do little to affect the supply of drugs. Sending police and informants to entrap high school students is sick said Tony Newman, Director of Media Relations at the Drug Policy Alliance. We see cops seducing 18-year-olds to fall in love with them, or befriending lonely kids and then tricking them into getting them small amounts of marijuana so they can stick them with felonies. We often hear that we need to fight the drug war to protect the kids, Newman said. As these despicable examples show, more often the drug war is ruining young people's lives and doing way more harm than good. Also in California, we have this week the third trial winding down for a San Diego medical marijuana dispensary owner. The third trial, you ask? Yes, the third one against Navy veteran Jovan Jackson is coming to an end in San Diego Superior Court before Judge Louis R. Hanoyan. Closing arguments were underway Friday morning, and the jury was expected to begin deliberations after lunch. San Diego District Attorney Bonnie DeManis, a staunch, nay fanatical opponent of medical marijuana, has waged a years-long effort to rid the county of dispensaries, and Jackson has borne the biggest brunt of that effort. After a 2008 law enforcement raid, Jackson was tried in 2009 for possession and sales of marijuana, but he was acquitted by a jury. Bonnie DeManis was dissatisfied with that result, so the district attorney tried Jackson again on the same charges stemming from another raid in 2009. At his second trial in 2010, Jackson was denied a medical defense and ultimately convicted. However, with the help of patient advocates Americans for Safe Access, Jackson appealed that decision and overturned his conviction with a 2011 landmark decision that gives dispensary operators the right to a defense in state court. Instead of admitting defeat, though, District Attorney DeManis is choosing to retry Jackson a third time. The prosecutor's theory of the case that all storefront medical marijuana dispensaries are illegal was flatly rejected by the Court of Appeal, said ASA Chief Counsel Joe Elford, who litigated the appeal. San Diego's district attorney's office is wasting thousands of taxpayer dollars in its vendetta against Jovan Jackson to scare dispensary operators throughout the state from providing marijuana to the qualified patients who need it. Jackson's case has become a symbol of the quixotic effort by DeManis and other prosecutors across the state to criminalize storefront medical marijuana dispensaries. A year ago, the 4th District Court of Appeal for California issued a unanimous published ruling on October 24th in the case of People versus Jackson, reversing Jackson's conviction and establishing a clear defense for Jackson and other medical marijuana providers similarly prosecuted in state court. DeManis appealed that decision, but the California Supreme Court refused to review the case, despite requests to depublish the appellate court decision from the League of California Cities and an amicus brief supporting the High Court's review from district attorneys in Los Angeles, Sacramento, and Sonoma counties, as well as the LA City Attorney. This landmark appellate decision held that in mounting a defense at trial, Jackson was only required to produce evidence which would create a reasonable doubt as to whether the defense provided by the Medical Marijuana Program Act had been established. The court further held that the collective or cooperative association required by the Act need not include active participation by all members in the cultivation process, but may be limited to financial support by way of marijuana purchases from the organization. Thus, contrary to the trial court's ruling, the large membership of Jackson's collective, very few of whom participated in the actual cultivation process, did not, as a matter of law, prevent Jackson from presenting a medical marijuana defense. In the state of Washington, a happy occurrence this week. A group of medical marijuana patients in Linwood, Washington this week got back more than 6 pounds of marijuana from the police after it was seized more than a year ago. Also returned were 202 dead marijuana plants. The Linwood Police Department seized the marijuana along with lights and other growing equipment in a May 2012 raid. The patients were following Washington's medical marijuana law, according to attorney Aaron Pelley, and no criminal charges were filed. Pelley and 2 other attorneys demanded that city officials return the items or pay nearly $1 million, which they said was the estimated value of all the property. The mayor didn't like the sound of that, and he signed off on the return of the marijuana. Pelley picked up the marijuana on Tuesday. He said after a year in storage, it's no longer any good for smoking, but it might still be usable to make cannabis oil or marijuana-infused products. The police were not happy that they had to return 6 pounds of weed. according to Deputy Chief Brian Stanifer. But they also didn't want to face that $1 million lawsuit. Before we go, let's look at a couple of must-read stories that you don't want to miss on Toke Signals this week. First of all, from the Queen of Green, Sherry Sicard, we have Let's Have Cannabis-Infused Mini Pumpkin Pies. Now, talk about delicious seasonal recipes. This is the quintessential holiday dessert, Sherry says, kicked up with cannabis. And as it so happens, the tastes of cannabis and pumpkins work really well together. So this is a recipe well worth trying, particularly if you are a pumpkin fan. The other must-read that you want to check out, especially if you are interested in marijuana cultivation, LED grow lights make growing marijuana easy, or do they, on Toke Signals this week. Now, of course, as we all know, marijuana growers are an opinionated bunch of folks. They can argue about almost anything relating to weed cultivation, and that certainly includes the kind of lights they use for indoor growing. So this one is sure to create lots of discussion. Check it out on tokesignals.com. LED grow lights make growing marijuana easy, or do they? I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope you elect to check back in with us next week for the freshest marijuana news on the web. Until that time, I hope you stay lifted. I'll see you then.